Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am super excited because today I am talking to Luke Laurie. Luke, say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hey Luke. As I've mentioned in some previous videos, and certainly if you're familiar with League of Game Makers, Luke is an original. He started the group with Peter and a number of other guys, and he is one of the key designers in the group. Luke, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself to start, and then we'll dive in.
All right. Well, by day, I'm a science teacher. I've been teaching junior high science for 20 years. I do Lego robotics and all kinds of stuff like that with my day job, but somehow I still find a lot of my creative energy goes into my side career, which is game design, which I'm well into past my 5 years of doing this now.
Awesome, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm so excited to be talking to you. Is I've spoken to a number of sort of creator, designer, Kickstarter, and I was talking with Randy, who sort of went the developer route, and Peter went the developer route. But you've been sort of honed in on design, and you started pretty small, right? You were doing Stones of Fate with Cosmic Wombat, right?
Yeah. So I. It's kind of hard to describe how I first started getting into game design, but it wasn't like it was driven by a big ambition to be a game designer. I'm the kind of person that almost anything that I get involved in, any kind of hobby, I look at it and think to myself, "Oh, I could do that." Whether it's theater or music or building robots or whatever. And game design was kind of the latest thing. I'd played Dungeons and Dragons for like 30 years of my life. I'd done Magic the Gathering. And, when you play Magic, you spend a lot of time constructing your decks. And essentially, you're building a game every time you're building your decks and thinking about the metagame and how they're going to fit together.
Absolutely.
And I'd gotten really into some of the gateway Euro type games and started to explore the hobby in a different way. And I was really late to come into it. But right away, my creative side of me started looking at ways that I could build games and how would I do something different in the market. So I built Stones of Fate. It was published by Cosmic Wombat Games. It took 2 years. It was a Kickstarter. We had the fun of bringing it to cons and all that stuff, that hype and everything.
Well, let me slow you down for a second. So just, again, because a lot of people who come to the league are aspiring designers. In terms of Stones of Fate, you said it was your design. How did you meet the Cosmic Wombat guys? What was that little synergy moment that got it to the point where everyone's like, let's make a Kickstarter together?
So we had a real interesting time in that we had a convergence of a whole bunch of different gamers in our city, and we had a game group that just swelled in size really quickly. I became friends with my friend Jeff Cornelius, and he fiddled around with game design, and I fiddled around with game design, and we did this together. And he decided, I don't really want to become a designer. I want to become a publisher.
Oh. So
he had his dream of being a publisher. I had my dream of seeing this game at least see light of day. And I built the game. I tried shopping it to various publishers, and I eventually brought it back to my friend, Jeff. And he took it and ran with it, and that was history. That game got published.
And Jeff's an interesting guy. Having talked with him and hung out with him a bunch, he really was like, I'm a publisher. I'm not the designer. I want to be the guy publishing the game and bringing it to the market and doing the marketing. And so he was very much that particular voice. But so you do the Kickstarter. Presumably it was successful, and Stones of Fate went to backers into stores. And then next up, you're doing the Manhattan Project sequel with Minion Games, right? Like, that's a big jump. How did that happen?
So the reality is that jump wasn't as big as it looks.
Certainly looks big. Come on.
It turns out that Stones of Fate was a little small box game. It was a little $20 game. And it had a mechanic of like peeking at cards and moving these stones around and stuff like that. And it would take you 15 minutes, 30 minutes tops in a big game. That game was born from a mechanic of this big giant game that I was working on. So I had this large scale game called Age of Prophecy. And Age of Prophecy had dudes on a map and area control, and it had secret deployment of units, and it was kind of Euro-ish, kind of war game-ish. But part of it was this idea that your prophecies would allow you to see these coming events, and that whole prophecy aspect was the stones and the cards.
Got it.
So that one mechanic, that larger game, became my first published game, Stones of Fate. And Age of Prophecy remains forever unfinished.
Well, so that's a big game, but it's not like Energy Empire was Age of Prophecy.
No, not at all.
So you sort of have this taste of doing a design, Stones of Fate's coming out, and you're working on your own designs, you're thinking about what you're going to do next and how to get to the market, and how did you get that lift or to talking with James and Minion Games, and because that's a bit, I don't want to, Cosmic Wombat's a cool group of guys, and I like them, but that was their first Kickstarter. Minion Games has been around; they've done a ton of them. Their quality's going up. So, and Manhattan Project's like a major, not like it's a big IP and it's a known IP. So how did that come together?
So in terms of like the path involved me building lots of big designs. So that Age of Prophecy was a big design, and I built several other large-scale games, some kind of like medium weight, medium heavy level Euros. There was some synergy in that I started working on a game that involved some energy production and industry and the environment and stuff like that, and I started integrating this worker placement mechanic that was pretty similar to the Manhattan Project. The game was at the time was called Drill Baby Drill, and there was a lot more of the game was focused around the oil markets and drilling for oil, right, and the cost benefits that would go into that, and the harm that you have to live with each of the choices that you make.
And so that is a shift from Manhattan Project, which is really just about making missiles or bomb, So it's a shift, right?
Yeah, there's so many games where like you build and you build and you build, and you never suffer any consequences for overbuilding.
Well, you lose the game if you don't build enough, right?
there are games where you got to feed your people, but I'm always taken back to I used to play Warcraft 2, and in Warcraft 2, you drill for oil in there. If you remember that, you had boats that would go out, they'd tap the oil. You'd mine and you'd chop down your trees for your wood and all that. And eventually your resources run out.
And you're tapped out and you got to go. You got to expand.
If you're tapped out and that was the focus of your strategy, you're kind of hosed. And so I always liked this idea that you could make these choices, but you were going to have to deal with these consequences. So all these elements started coming together in that game, and I brought it to Kubla Khan. And at Kubla Khan, there's this real synergy at this one Kubla Khan, where Peter Vaughn and I roomed together. He had Letter Tycoon at the time in a super rough form,
designed by Brad Brooks, another lead guy.
Yeah, and that went on to be a really successful game. We met Teal at that convention, and he had Shadow Throne, and he hadn't published Shadow Throne yet.
Mr. Fristo.
And I met a few people, and a few people tried out Drill Baby Drill, and one of them was Seth Jaffe from Tasty Minstrel Games. One of them was Aldo, and Aldo is from Impressions.
And we've done a talk with Aldo as well on the channel.
Oh, it's great. And Aldo distributes all the Manhattan Project games. So he's really familiar with Minion Games. He was really familiar with Manhattan Project, and he'd always been telling James Matthey, who owns he owns Minion Games. He'd always been telling him, you gotta do more with this IP. And he
loves that story, by the way. As Energy Empire has been a hit and everything else, and the card one, I forget the name of it off the hand, but like the
Chain Reaction.
He's always like, yeah, I told James to do that. But go on.
So yeah, well, he can take all the credit he wants. That's fine.
Well,
as long as we keep working together.
Yeah.
So anyway, the game got a lot of attention there, but Tasty Minstrel wanted to take a look at it first. So we ended up taking it to Gen Con. We did show it off at the publisher speed dating. It did get a lot of attention. And but when we Kathy looks down at us and he says, "Put that in my bag," and don't show it off today. Just put it in my bag and we're done. So it turns out that eventually TMG passed on it. They sent it back to us. They said, they were working on smaller games at the time, and so then we worked it into the Manhattan Project universe. And in spite of what some people say, there's huge relationship between the Manhattan Project and everything that occurred in the energy industry afterwards. Right. So, little known fact, for example, is that the Manhattan Project was the beginning of the Department of Energy in the United States, for example.
That teacher's coming out in you.
This is history stuff, but yeah. So
let me do a quick sidebar. For those, I mean, again, it comes up on posts on the page and on videos, but the speed dating thing's a big deal, especially if you're an aspiring designer. It's totally open. It's done at lots of cons. Gen Con has one. I mean, there's proto-spiels too, but the speed dating, I think, is there's an Origins. I think there's like 4 over the course of the year. I may be mistaken, but there's a bunch of them. And it is this incredible, it's 1 or 2 nights. Designers come, they bring their games. Almost every publisher is there. I mean, everyone throws a representative there. And people are just playing prototypes. And tons of deals get at least talked about and moved forward in that. So if you're at a con and it has a speed dating and you are a designer, you really should submit your sell sheet to be considered to be part of the speed dating, or if not, just go watch it and hand a flyer. So I can't recommend that speed dating enough. I have asked James to put like a list of successful dates, marriages out of speed dating, because it's really high. There's a lot of games.
Yeah, and it's a little hard to track, which ones actually got paired up. But in some cases, that gave the designers the opportunity in the pitch practice that maybe they didn't sign with the people that they talked to that night, but it allowed them to hone what they were working on and to make what they're working on able to be signed with another publisher later. Absolutely. And I've done it. I think I've done it 3 times, and every time I had a great time, even if I didn't walk out of it with a deal. It's also something that I would definitely suggest for people who they're good on their feet and they're good at expressing themselves and talking about games. If that's not you, then you might want to partner up with someone who can do some of the faster pitching in order to communicate the game well in a very short amount of time.
And I've never really thought of it, but I don't think there's any restriction from somebody sitting with you during a speed date, right? If you can sit there as a team and just have, hey, I'm working with Joe and it's me and I'm the designer, and if Joe's the marketing guy and he can express it well, I don't think there's there's no hard rule against that, is there?
It's it's a little informal. I don't think anybody's checking IDs or
checking IDs. But so first, Energy Empire, right? I mean, I know it sold out at least 1 print run, probably more. It's been critically acclaimed. The Dice Tower, Rahdo was in the top 10, even top 3. I don't remember. It's number 1. There you have it. Number 1. That's high praise.
Yeah.
It's extremely well reviewed on BGG, moving up the charts. And I believe you've been nominated for New Designer as part of the Dice Tower Awards. Is that correct? That's
what I saw right there with Terraforming Mars. That was pretty exciting.
There's some competition, but I mean, kudos for all that. And so again, you went small Kickstarter, speed dating, mid-weight, mid-range IP company, Minion Games. And so with that success and the experience, I don't know that there's anything announced, but you're now partnering up with some even bigger publishers, right?
Yeah, so I don't want to sugarcoat it too much, because like if you're to take that path, there's like this success and this success and this success. And there's like a dozen failures in there, major failures in there. There are games that I have completely walked away from that I was attached to for a year or more. But failure is the norm in this. I mean, we're creating things that they do need to be a product, and they also need to be innovative, and they need to be fun. And you have to have the right combination of things really come together, and then you have to make that personal connection. and there's a little bit of luck that comes into that. But so I did work with Tom Jolly on Energy Empire, and he and I co-designed another game after that, which all the pieces just seemed to be falling into place really rapidly. And that game, from its very first prototype, worked. And it went from like version 1 to like version 1A, 1B, and it only got to like version 1F, and it never got to version 2 before we signed it. So many of the pieces were in place that within 10 months, we went from initial prototype to signing that game. And so Tom and I signed that game with Z-Man, but that's about all I can tell you. But we're really excited because Z-Man's huge. It's now a subsidiary of Asmodee, and they're kind of the Borg and engulfing lots of smaller companies, but they're also doing a lot to elevate the hobby. And
Absolutely.
They're making a lot of great games.
And I just want to go in on one of the things that you were just saying, right? As a publisher, oftentimes talk about taking swings, trying games to the market, seeing what happens. But often with designers, a lot of it's about designing something, setting it aside, working on something else, setting aside, pitching something, getting feedback, iterating, pitching it to somebody else. I mean, there's a lot of these sort of sub-steps and missteps and misses and hits that are sort of not at the product stage, but in the design concept game phase and the prototype phase. That's all part of the process. So I mean, again, because you just said this, but it's not that it was one design, two design, three designs. It's really this sequence of considerable effort and hard work. Also networking, being in those places to talk to those people and meet those people, right? You weren't only sitting around in your room trying to submit over the internet to, submission forms.
So much of what you described, it's almost like a mad scientist workshop, full of all these gadgets, and any given design or abandoned design, those parts can still end up coming up and being used in some other way. But also it's a mental discipline. And I don't see any of the design failures, the things that didn't become a published game, I don't see them as a loss at all, because I feel the intellectual development, the kind of the puzzling that makes my future work better also. But also related to another thing you said is with this one, with our most recent design, we were lucky enough to pitch it via email, and that was it. No,
disregard.
that probably what my biggest game to date, we didn't ever have to pitch it in person.
Wow.
And I don't know if that'll be the only one that's ever like that, but boy, that would be amazing if that would be the new norm.
Well, at some point, a couple of these hit titles, as the designer, people just sort of start saying, show us what you got. We got to see the next game, right? And that's a huge step, right? I feel that way oftentimes when talking with a lot of European designers who are sort of in that zone of like, I just make games and people pick it up whatever I hand to them. But okay, so you're on this trajectory, you're having fun, part-time job, you're still a perhaps tenured teacher. I mean, you're still rocking. I'm
very tenured. I have deep roots. 20 years in the same school.
Yeah. And and you're doing it. You're not in that publisher space. You're not in the Kickstarter space. You're really just working on designs and working with designers, and then, pitching and pitching. And presumably, because, whatever your contracts are, but these things are now starting to roll into royalties and payments and a little bit of an egg that's building, I would assume. Has it started that way? Is it still sort of like, no, I just do this for fun and there's really $0 coming out of this so far?
So almost everything about game design costs you money and costs you time. And I think it's going to be hard for me to identify the exact break-even point because it depends on what you count and what you don't. I love to go to conventions. I love to go to the Protospiel type events. I run the one at Pacificon. And anytime I go to a convention, I mean, that's money, right? And, no matter how cleverly you do your taxes, you still wind up in the hole from look at that wall of games behind you. I mean, those weren't all donated.
No, no, they weren't.
We,
Though the reviewer thing has helped out a little bit, offset some
yeah.
of that. But no, no, it's a huge expense. The cons
So
and the games, right?
yeah. So yeah, there is some revenue coming in now, and that's great. It's it's hardly riches. It it's about the equivalent of if I was the coach on top of my day
Sure.
job. It's that kind of thing that you do for the love of it, not for lavish vacations or something like that.
But you can take your family out to dinner once a
I
quarter.
Yeah, and that's I treat anything that comes in as like a bonus, and I'm happy about that.
Awesome. Well, so we've sort of hit the 20-minute mark, and I've been trying to sort of keep that in the range of these chats. But for aspiring designers, people who are coming in, maybe have done one game or haven't done anything yet. I mean, what's your just general advice you like to give, really focused on designers?
So one of the main reasons why I have stuck to just being a designer is really similar to why I'm a teacher and I will never be a principal. As a designer, you have to have some degree of comfort that your work will be a little bit like it's the bulk of what the product is. It's the bulk of the outcome, but it still might end up feeling like you're kind of the power behind the throne.
Sure.
You don't necessarily make the box look the way it does or design the graphics the way. And you have to give up some of that control when you choose to only be a designer, and you have to be comfortable with that. I tell myself that the work that the other people, the developers and the artists who go and take my design, I'm pretty optimistic that they're going to make it better than I would have with my own artistic sense and so on. And even if I could have gone and run the Kickstarter and done every little detail of sticking labels on boxes and
Sure.
dealing with all of the annoyances of the accounting and everything that goes into publishing, that takes me away from that regular disciplined pattern of going and just doing design work. And I think that I'm far more prolific with my designs because I haven't chosen to try to do and be everything.
Right.
And for new designers, that design that you started with and you really love, it might end up being great and it might not. And I would like designers in general to not be so wedded to each individual project that they tackle, and instead look at the bigger picture of the discipline. How
Sure.
am I becoming the designer who will make that great game? And it doesn't have to be this one right here in this moment. It could be any of these.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great advice, right? You see it definitely with young designers and new designers, and I think that appreciation for design in general, and there's really not enough great literature on it. There's more coming here and there, but just understanding the fundamentals and weaving it into what you're doing and going back to things, going back and saying, hey, that design I thought was awesome, I now know wasn't so awesome, but I can now see the 7 problems with it and go ahead and try to fix them, right?
Yeah, it can be humbling. And I know we want to stick to the time, but the key way that you learn about that and learn about yourself is through going to these events, getting to those protospiels and encountering all these other designers and finding out how high their stack of failures is and looking at great work that's out there. And those events really are enlightening to see what it is like to be a designer.
Yeah, absolutely, and that actually makes me think of. I just linked this in a Facebook conversation today, but there's an incredible 2-minute audio clip with a little video thing from Ira Glass, which is him talking about being creative writing. If you just look up Ira Glass creative writing, and talking about how a lot of times artists and creators are frustrated because they're working on things and they know it's not good enough and they don't feel like they're good enough and they sort of quit, when the reality is what it means is that they have good taste and they can see that they're not there yet, but they just work through it and over time get the skills that meet the quality. It's a great little 2-minute thing, and I highly recommend it, and I think it speaks to what you were talking about. But And we can always do another one of these, which is always great to talk to you, and we can do it maybe in person at the next con. But so thanks for being on.
Thank you. It was a
And
great time.
yeah, and so everyone, continue to check out the league stuff and be well.
So long. Thanks for having me, Eduardo.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye.